welcome back to the road to the draft. We have the last pod before we get to the live stream, the big day. Tyler, how you doing?
Good. Yeah, we're stoked. I mean, it's Wednesday right now. This is coming out, we think, Friday, but man, I still feel all that same excitement, kind of like Christmas Eve, even 4 or 5 days out.
I was gonna say we have the draft, we have the college football game coming out. I feel like this is like a filler episode these next couple of days. Fun stuff happens. Any Rockies news? Any reports coming out of Rockies Nation? What do you think is gonna happen?
I mean, yeah, the draft stuff is it's so hard to see what's gonna happen. I mean, the Rockies certainly are always trying to keep things under wraps. Like occasionally, and we saw it in 2021, the Benny Montgomery pick. Nobody was expecting it like going into draft week, but then come draft week, everyone had Benny Montgomery as the pick there, and like obviously there was some kind of either leak or something like that gave people a clue Benny Montgomery is going to be the guy. Otherwise, like from the public surface, it's just so hard to really gauge into this stuff. We were just talking about the odds. Like if you're betting on this stuff, like you are screwed. You have no chance.
There's only one odds listed. We'll talk about it. It's for the first overall pick, and the favorite is Travis Bazzana at minus 125, 55% implied odds there. What are your thoughts on that? Like, do you think that's going to come to like be real? I mean, 55% not a lock, but do you think they'll go Travis? JJ Weatherhold's got some steam going there, or is it just much of the same as like last week?
Yeah, I think it ends up being Bazzana, and it's funny that the implied odds are 55%. I think that's like fair. They could go probably 3 or 4 different directions with that pick, and it's so hard to know what it'll be. But if they have so much money to spend with that pick that they could take anyone and still go under slot. Like nobody is touching the slot value of that pick, which is it's like 10,500,000. Nobody's come within $1.3 million of that slot. So like no matter what Cleveland does, they can save money, and that's their goal. So I think they'll end up taking Bazzana and just get the best player available at a good position. Like second baseman that hit like that really don't come around often, but could see Weatherholt in the mix. He's been talked about as a guy that could save them a lot of money. I just don't really see the point in doing that. They're already going to save money with Bazzana.
Yeah, I think you have to leave the draft with a quality player. And we have the chance to draft a guy like Bazzana, who could be a top 10 prospect in baseball. I think it would be an all-time fumble if they didn't get Bazzana at the end of this. So we go to pick 2, and pick 2 I think is like the turning point in the draft. I think pick 1, it's going to be one of the second baseman, shortstop, whether it's Weatherholt, Bazzana. I think that's almost a lock. Pick 2 though, we have no clue, and there's no odds for it. Every single news outlet, it's different. Some like Cags, I like Cags will go there. Some think Bazzana will go there. Some think Condon. And we don't even know what the Reds. What do you think will happen? What is the best case scenario for the Rockies?
I mean, I think the best case scenario for Colorado, at least, would be Jack Caglianone. And we'll get into a little bit more as to why. It's sort of just, imagine you're in when you're in your fantasy football draft and your 2 picks are like, in this case, a pick off the board, and you have a guy in mind and it's not that guy that gets taken. You're happy 10 times out of 10. So for the Rockies, if it's someone like that, again, we'll get into it a little bit more, that isn't the top of their board, they're going to be happy to see somebody else get drafted and leave them with, I mean, still a choice potentially with if someone like Caglianone goes and there's 2 guys that they're still, just kind of really high on. But at that point, I also think that someone like Chase Burns could be in play. Again, we talk about the money going under slot there and saving a lot more money for the next pick. That's certainly something Cincinnati is going to be more inclined to do, because they don't have, like, Cleveland has that massive number 1 pick. They also have another comp pick before the Rockies even do. So Cleveland's pool is massive. Cincinnati's pool is not nearly as big. So they're more incentivized to save money at that pick. That's why I think we've seen Charlie Condon mock there. I kind of don't really see it unless, Charlie Condon is not signing for as much as some people expect. So that one's so hard to predict, though, like you've said. I'm betting it's going to be, either Jack or maybe they do get Condon and are not looking to save that much money. I think it'll probably be one of those 2 guys. But like I said, Cags the preferred pick for the Rockies' interest.
I know the Reds, and I kind of pointed out yesterday in the group chat, they have this weird philosophy almost where they kind of go for just really fun players. Like, Ellie De La Cruz might be the most fun player in baseball. And then they have a second baseman in Double-A that's like the quickest guy ever. And they just call it dude up with insane power. It's just guys that have great tools, and I think Jack fits the mold. And you can't really go wrong at pick 2. But like you said, you do kind of want to save money, especially if you're the Reds, who were an 81 team last year. The MLB lottery, I know we always say it's messed up and kind of stupid, but they got rewarded, and they need to save some of that money to get some more quality players down the board. So the Rockies scenario, let's get into it. What is the dream scenario for the Rockies?
Yeah, I think there's one dream scenario that, for us as fans, I know a lot of us have shared sentiments on Twitter and stuff like that. I think also for the Rockies front office, the dream scenario is Charlie Condon is there, and they don't really think so much about the money. They are seeking the best player and someone that they think can come in and mash like right out of the gate. I think the Rockies still have some in their scouting department where like they're not going to overthink this too much, and they're going to look at that production. And we talked off air that college production can be misleading, but at times also it just shows who can really go out there and get it done. Charlie Condon is that guy. So I think the dream scenario is Charlie Condon, but there's plenty of other options that wouldn't be, half bad. I don't think there is a wrong pick here, and it's always going to come down in the end to what the player signs for, or you could really tell before their signings who else the Rockies draft.
Yeah, I agree. I think no matter what, our farm is going to get a lot better after this Sunday. This Sunday and Monday, we have some good picks in the second day. I think any of the pitchers would be a pretty bad pick. I know you like the pitchers, but if Bazana's there, that's the 10 out of 10 dream world. But I don't think Bazana will be there. I think he doesn't fall past 2. I think the Reds are also saying, hey, if Bazana's there, that's the dream world. So I don't think he gets past that. I don't like. I kind of share the same sentiment. We need a hitter. I was watching John Boy earlier, and they were talking about how they should have walked Devers instead of throwing to him. And I was like, when's the last time the Rockies had a hitter that you even thought about walking when the base is open with someone on second? I can't really remember when there was an automatic walk in the Rockies lineup. I think Condon could be that. I think he's that good of a hitter, especially if he can hit a stride.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and think that concept has been thrown out the window for pitching struggles, which we are never not going to have pitching struggles. That is the Rockies' way. There's always going to be struggles on that end. Make sure you have depth, make sure you have talented players. But this is certainly a bad year for pitching. Last year was too. Don't want to be excited by what your team looks like right this second, because that's not what the team is going to look like when your first round pick reaches the big leagues. But as you said, the Rockies have not had that feared bat in the lineup since. Nolan for sure was that guy, but even then, he wasn't that hitter that can come in and just absolutely wreck a game all the time, because he didn't walk a ton. He was a little aggressive at times. So there'd be some at bats that he kind of throws himself out of, and that's not to say there were problems with this game. He was fantastic, but Charlie Condon is that he has another level of power, potentially another level just as with the plate discipline and stuff too. He has the potential to be the best Rockies hitter since Todd Helton, Matt Holliday, that kind of crew, which that should get people really excited to potentially add somebody like that.
Yeah, I think when you're that good at hitting and you have that polished of a game, I really think he'll come into the league and have. I don't really think it matters what position you play. At the end of the day, you have to kind of get that offensive production, and he can play a corner, maybe a third base, but I don't think at cores you'd want him at third, especially we'll still probably have Ryan McMahon, so. I think it's a perfect pick. What's the slot value looking like for these picks, though, for Condon and Bazana?
Yeah, so the Rockies are slotted at 907, a little more than that once you round. I think Condon, just off the back of being the Golden Spikes winner, set the BB Core home run record, he is probably setting his sights absolute bare minimum for him is going to be 9 million. And I've seen some mocks where he's going pick 4, pick 5 in the instance that these high teams wanted to go under slot, but you can't push a guy like that down the board necessarily. It's just not going to end up playing out. His agent will at some point come down a little bit to be hey, this guy is a great player. You want him. We'll come down, $100,000 and fit this in. I think he's basically a full slot guy for the Rockies. And as we mentioned, they're not always looking to play the slot game. They just want to get their guys. They're not going to pass on a really good player in order to go under slot most of the time. So I think Charlie Condon is full slot. Bazana is probably in the same boat. I think maybe he's like a flat 9 instead of like Condon pushing, for like 9.1. Not much of a difference, but there's that. And then, there's those other situations that we can go ahead and dive into. Like the pitchers are certainly going to be in the mix. Maybe JJ Weatherholt. I think that's kind of all you're really going to consider at this point. I mean, I guess Jack, if someone doesn't want to believe that the Rockies are not in on Jack, he's probably in that tier also. Those guys are all going to be clustered like $1 million, $500K below slot, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I want to kind of put it into perspective, and I think it's kind of stupid when you try and save money, especially for like the Rockies when you just need talent. The Rockies are essentially lost $700,000 on when they DFA'd Dakota Hudson. So in the grand scheme of things, paying an extra $700,000 compared to a different player to get the guy you want is not much in the whole grand scheme of baseball. Like it's definitely 1,000% worth it. So saving $500K to get a lesser guy on your board, I think is always worse, especially for the Rockies. I like our farm depth. I don't like the value at the top. And I think Condon brings the value at the top. The pitchers, I don't really think, what are they going to be, like a top 30 prospect in baseball or top 50 probably?
Probably top 30,
I think Condon brings a different type of vibe to this team, and I think that's definitely going to be the pick. But you said these pitchers, I know we kind of grouped them together. Chase Burns, Hagen Smith, which one's kind of, I know we talked probably the last 2 weeks about it, but who right now has more steam going into Sunday?
I mean, I think it's Chase Burns, just based on the fact that he's like that electric factory, throwing out, top at 101, has 2 breaking balls, whereas Hagen Smith, we've really only seen one other pitch. But also, they're just completely inverse pitchers. I mean, obviously, it starts with one's righty, one's lefty, but the entire way they attack hitters is different. So I think it ends up coming down just to team preference there. And, I don't know that there is anything separating those guys. It just comes down to, again, a team has their model that they want. This guy fits the model better. So, like, they could even acknowledge, hey, that guy might be a better pitcher, but this guy fits what we want in a pitcher more. That's what we're going to develop. That's what, works, especially for the Rockies. They have to consider what works for us. It's not just this is the type of player we want. This is a guy that might work at Coors Field. I think for them, both these guys would be fine in that instance. But those two are really, just preferential at this point.
So I gotta ask, like you say they're kind of equal, but one of them's a lefty, one's a righty. Would that not be the difference there?
It could be for a team that has no left-handed pitching in their system. I don't. At the end of the day, I don't think you want to make that the determination. In some instances, a team might say, "Hey, we're in a division right now with another Rocky." The NL West used to have a ton of just really elite left-handed hitters, and that's where you might target a left-handed pitcher. I don't think you would want to make that the determination and instead just kind of look at those guys as as they are. And it's a factor, but probably not the differentiating factor.
Yeah, and I must say, like you kind of already brought it up. When we're looking at pitching, we look at like a big board, a draft big board. The Rockies' big board will look completely different than the 29 other teams, and that's how it should be. That's how it should be run. If it's not, then it's a little different. Like if it's the same board, then the Rockies aren't doing it right. So especially when we get into later rounds, I think we saw with Sean Sullivan, like you guys were, not you, but some people thought it wasn't really like, I mean, some people didn't like the pick at all. Look at it now. It's one of the best picks we've had. So the board's going to look different. I don't think we'll see that in the first round, but I think definitely rounds 2 through 20, if we start reaching on guys, I don't think, especially if they're pitching, we always got to remember, Coors is a little different. You got to look through it through that lens.
Well, and then, you always have to also keep in mind the slot there. Like if you can get a guy in round 2 or round 3 and you save a little bit of money that you use later in the draft, like, you're still getting a guy that you like and believe in. And that might not have lasted to your next pick. So there's so many considerations that go into picks. Like it is, it's easy to have reactions immediately. I think the first round is where those immediate reactions make more sense. But even then, if the Rockies did go out on draft night and they took Chase Burns and it's an underslot pick, that's money that might really impact the rest of their draft and boost their farm system. We haven't really seen the Rockies do that, though, and so I think that is, again, a caveat of, like, if Charlie Condon's on the board, they're not thinking twice about the money there. But when it comes to the second and third round, you're looking at the difference between, a few $100,000. That can really impact your draft when it comes day 3. Maybe take a high school player who has signability issues, concerns, like whether they're going to sign for a certain amount of money. If you have that flexibility, you might be able to get a guy that you really like in the draft, like on day 3. So there's just so many things to consider. It's hard to label a pick bad until you see the full picture.
And we've seen a couple guys on day 3, even this year, like a Caleb Hobson. It just kind of feels like it's all come together. And those players can play. Those players, you need that type of depth, especially in their minor league system, and you need that depth in the major leagues. Let's transition. I think you just brought it up. Saving money, spending money on the first pick. If we're spending a lot of money, what's the second round or the comp round looking like?
Yeah, so if Condon's that guy and you take the whole slot up, the Rockies are in a funny position where the flexibility almost would lend itself better to them. Like if they did save some money, it allows you to really run the draft and control the back of the first round, the back of the first, early second round, that comp range, because you can now price a prep player down to you. A guy, let's throw out a name like Theo Gillen is a prep shortstop who's been talked about a lot in the late teens, the 20s. If the Rockies are able to come up with the money to offer him at pick 38, he's going to say no to the other teams. He has that leverage to say, I'm going to go to college if I don't get exactly what I want. And if the Rockies are like, hey, at pick 38, we'll give you $3.5 million, which is $1 million over their slot there. The only teams that could match that are starting at pick 24 and up. So if he doesn't have interest at that point, the Rockies are able to control that. And if they think he's a really good player, you've gotten yourself two first-round picks basically in one draft and a huge steal. So I think that really is important to preface this with just an example. But if Condon is the pick, you can't do that. And you're looking at college guys exclusively. We talked about some of them last week, and we can kind of hone in on some of those guys here.
Yeah, let's go and start honing in on them. As much as I love Condon, I love college players. I think they're really fun. We have the data on them. We do need to get younger as a farm system. I don't know if that comes from the international side or we can draft high schoolers. But if we draft Condon, it doesn't look like we're going to get much younger. Let's just get into the players that if we spend all $9 million, what could the slot values look like in terms of players for the next 2 picks?
Yeah, so pick 38 is $2.5 million, roughly $2.45 million. And that's a lot. That is a lot of money. And there's still plenty of prep guys that could be in play there. Like $2.5 million is usually kind of a magic number for some of those high-end prep guys to, forego college and say, I'm good with that. But that it limits your options though if you can't go over that. I think the college guys that make the most sense. We've talked about Gerangelo St. G. We're going to have to iron the name out because I think legitimately that is a target for the Rockies if he's available at 38. I know we're going to have our full first round mock release before the draft. He didn't make it that far, but you never know with the draft how things are going to play out. So I think he is arguably the number one guy that'll be on their board come pick 38 if he's there. He would be kind of a home run guy. Some of the other pitchers, Bryce Cunningham, Jonathan Santucci, and Ryan Johnson, I think are prime guys. You could probably get them a hair under slot in that range. I think the Rockies are going to be looking to do that. I don't think they want to max out all their picks right away. So those are probably your top options. And then we've talked about Tommy White and Billy Amick as power hitters, corner infielders from the college ranks. I think those guys could be in play for sure too.
Yeah, I feel like we talked about it last pod. We look at the corner infield, and we definitely need some help there. And pitching too. If we're going to draft Condon, I think we got to go pitching, especially heavy in the next mid to late rounds of the draft. Let's just jump right into the fun stuff, right? Like if we're saving money, who's in play? Like if my strategy for this is like, hey, let's package a bunch of money for that second pick, and let's go out there and let's get another top 20 player in the draft. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what this draft. I mean, those top slot values are just so inflated and so much bigger. Like the top 3 makes anything outside of the top 5 look tiny, and it gives you this chance to, if you save $1 million, that's so much money to be able to add on to another pick that a lot of other teams, they could do it, but then they're not able to get like a top 5 talent in the draft also. So the top 3, there's so much flexibility. It's kind of a GM, draft director's dream to be able to play out these scenarios of like, we could save a lot of money here. And that gives us a chance, at that point, that's really where it breaks the model that people have of a draft. It is now, we already agreed to terms with that guy before the draft. We're going to pick him. We know we're going to pick him. And that's how it ends up working. If you have that extra money, you get to run the draft the way you want to run it. So if let's say Chase Burns, because I think it really is going to come down to Charlie Condon and Chase Burns. He's probably signing for around $8 million. That's probably his magic number. Maybe a hair above that if he's picked by the Rockies, who have $9 million there. But let's say for the sake of this exercise that the Rockies have an extra $1 million to spend. And I already alluded to this. You turn that pick 38 into a $3.5 million selection, that's a middle of the first round, kind of back of the first round type of pick now. Like that sounds great in retrospect, right? And there's so many guys that are on the board that we could take, that would be otherwise of interest to teams in the mid-20s. So that part gets really fun. I don't know. Do you have any in mind off the bat that you would most prefer the Rockies to get?
Slade Caldwell is my guy, but I don't know how much he'd cost. I know he's a high school guy, but assuming we go and save like $1 million, I think we could probably go out there and get him. I think it's really funny. We're talking about the draft and like, oh, we have the most money. It's kind of like the opposite of like free agency. It's like the Dodgers, Yankees have the most money, but here it's like Guardians, Rockies, White Sox. Like this is our time to really show off the money. But yeah, I like Slade Caldwell a lot, especially if we can go pitcher. I want to go either pitcher or hitter. I know you don't draft for need, but you got to balance it out.
But yeah, I think the balancing is like it's like technically need, but it's also like teams you never can really predict needs like years in advance. So I think keeping things balanced is a great strategy. And if you take Burns, I think you do want to look to a prep bat. And I don't think the Rockies, just for the we should have mentioned this earlier, I don't think the Rockies are going to be, at least in this range, considering a prep pitcher. You never know. They took Jackson Cox in 2022, and people weren't really expecting that. But this year, it's such a rich class for prep hitters. So if you take Chase Burns, you mentioned Slade Caldwell. We've compared him to Corbin Carroll, and I think that's a popular comp that he's received. And then some other guys that could be of interest. PJ Morlando I think he was a top 15 prospect going into the year, and his high school numbers this year, they were really good. He hit like 500 or something, but the power didn't necessarily show up, probably because no one was pitching to him. But he really has fallen on at least media draft boards. So if he's available in that range and you could sign him for a bit over slot, I think that'd be a fantastic pick for the Rockies to get a guy. At the draft combine, he was wrecking balls like 110 miles per hour. We know he can make a ton of contact. So that's one of those bats that you can, stick in a corner outfield spot, and there's just so much upside. And there's so many shortstops this year too. And I'd love to see the Rockies just build up a little bit more depth on the middle infield. And, we talk about it sometimes. Those are players that can end up going and playing anywhere else. You start at shortstop, maybe you're a second baseman, maybe third, maybe center field, corner outfield, whatever. That's how a lot of teams like the Rays draft. They draft a lot of athletic talent that you can end up moving around as needed. But the names there, I would really consider Tyson Lewis, mentioned Theo Gillen already. There's Carter Johnson, Wyatt Sanford. It's such a deep prep shortstop class. Like none of those early first round guys. I guess there's Bryce Rayner, but he potentially goes top 10. But outside of the top 10, there's just so many prep shortstops. I think just if you're playing the game in the draft, and that's trying to take advantage of a rich demographic, in this case prep shortstops, this is the year to do it. So really good opportunity for the Rockies if they do save money to add another premier talent.
Yeah, I think we talk about this all the time. Like if you play shortstop, there's so many fail safes that you have. Like if your glove isn't there but your bat's there, you can play third base, you play corner outfield. If your glove is there but the bat isn't, you can stick at shortstop or you can go to center field. There's so many different paths to playing time. And like usually when you're in the second round, the shortstops are dried up. But I think this year, the way you're explaining it, you could be in position to take a really good high school guy that you can develop. And we've seen the Rockies with these middle infielders. I feel like that's our best. I'm trying to think. I don't want to be wrong here, but I'd say that's our best position for developing. Like Amador, Brendan Rodgers is good if he doesn't get hurt. I think his career is a lot different. Tovar is a great example. Ryan Ritter. I feel like we're having so much success there. Like, why not just strike while the iron's hot?
Yeah, and that's just regardless even of just the shortstops, the prep bats. I mean, you think of Nolan Arenado with the Rockies too, that basically drafted as a third baseman. But that's an area where you're getting guys before like they have hit their peak. Like you were getting unripe fruit at that point, and but the potential is just through the roof. Like these guys all have more potential than their college counterparts. Of course, you're taking on a little bit more risk, but historically, prep hitters, those at least that have a polished bat, they don't end up that risky. They usually pan out. And if you look at a lot of the best drafted hitters in baseball, a lot of those guys were drafted from the prep ranks because, I mean, think about Gunnar Henderson. This is a guy who drafted late first round. He's now probably going to go and win AL MVP this year. Drafted out of high school. Tons and tons of raw talent. Bobby Witt Jr., Bryce Harper. I mean, Bryce Harper kind of. He skipped I don't know his story. It's weird. I think he skipped school or something and went JUCO. Just so many good prep hitters that have made it to Major League Baseball. Like it really is the way to get elite hitters, like the best way to get elite hitters, I should say.
Yeah, I think it's very much like if you see a guy if you see a guy and you're like, hey, we can develop that, you're gonna kind of spend whatever it takes to get that guy. Especially if it's a high school or college, they're already developed. They've already been through someone's system. The coach's philosophy has already been put onto them. I don't know if that's good or bad, but we see a guy like Condon, like I'm okay with that guy being a high schooler. That guy's gonna rank. But I mean, I agree. I mean, look at all around the league. It's either like a Dominican guy signed when they were 15, or it's a high school bat. And those dudes are dominating just because we can get them in the system, we can develop them, especially when there's not a lot of pressure on these high school guys. We see with Jackson Cox where it's like, even with an injury, there's no pressure for him to like be ready. Well, like a Dolander, there's a lot of pressure. Dolander has to be there in like 2 years. If he's not pro ready, he's kind of considered a bust. So I like those picks a lot. We can kind of stash them, wait a couple years, develop them. I'm a big fan of that. So let's go to the later on in the draft. Does the money play in the third round, or are we still just looking at slot value?
Yeah, I think the money ends up playing a bit. Like it's certainly not the same. You think about round one and that top 50 range, you can really change a lot. And especially with the Rockies' history, like odds are they're not going to do anything sweepingly crazy on day 3. But it is where you might be able to, if you saved a couple $100,000 on day 1, you're going to spend that on day 2 and elevate the players you're able to get. So I'm trying to think of some of the more recent, like well above slot guys that they got day 3. I mean, you can definitely think about Bryce McGowan is the main one who comes to mind. He was an 18th round pick, but now is a very legit relief prospect for the Rockies. And then every year there's college guys who also kind of in order to secure their they can go and interview with other teams. And if you offer them this amount of money, they might kind of be disinterested in other teams, and teams might shy away from that a little bit more. So even though they don't have leverage, the college guys, they still control their interview process and all that. So you might be able to dangle an extra $100,000 in front of a good college player, and it might just make the difference between you and another team, making the pick on that guy. So certainly not as big of a deal, but we always see year after year some prep guys signing on day 3. Usually those first picks on day 3 are high school guys, and you're kind of like, shouldn't they have been picked on day 1 if they were going to sign? But it's day 3. There's a guaranteed $150,000 available to those guys, and then you can go above that slot. That's usually what happens. So unlikely the Rockies do anything too crazy. Do you want to talk about the Rockies overall? Like how they're not going to be that aggressive at the end of the day.
I was going to ask, is there any teams that are like historically just weird with how they do the draft, or that's just really aggressive or really conservative?
I saw a tweet recently, and I forget who posted it and kind of what the trends were, but the Rockies were one of the teams, I think, in the history of the draft have never spent over the bonus pool, which in some ways I get. Like you don't want to take the risk of leaving certain guys unsigned because you gave too much money here, too much money there. You like to keep it really predictable. I think it's the Twins or the other team that has never gone over the bonus pool. But then there's some teams who are always pushing right up. You get 5% as an overage that you can spend. I want to say there might be like a tax associated with it, but there's no penalty of like a draft pick. So teams are usually always pushing up that 5%. Like there's usually 5 to 10 teams that do that. And then the Rockies, they're usually holding it very tight to the actual, slot bonus pool money. And there's no fault in that. They could spend, extra $100,000-$200,000, but at the end of the day, probably not making or breaking their drafts.
Is there a penalty for going over?
If you go over that 5%, I think they strip a first round pick from you. So you end up making like a decision, and I don't know if that's ever happened though.
I mean, Jackson. If Ethan Holiday's as good as Jackson Holiday, the Rockies shouldn't do it. But if I'm like the Yankees, fuck that first round pick.
Yeah, theoretically, if you're like next year we're going to be picking late, let's go $1 million over or two. I'm trying to think of what 5% usually is, but like $1 million, $2 million over, so that we can just like pick another guy who's really good that otherwise we wouldn't be able to sign. So you could do some crazy stuff, but certainly not the Rockies way.
So overall, the Rockies really safe team. Bill Schmidt, do you think this draft could change anything? Is there any confidence that we could be crazy here? Or is it going to be much of the same?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's ever a year to do it, this would be that year. The second most money in a bonus pool ever, and the most is Cleveland picking right ahead of them. So there's so much money to spend, and frankly, the demands of the players is not inflating at the same rate that these pools are. So it really gives the Rockies the chance to do something for their context, like unprecedented, that they could do something completely different. Draft a huge overslot high school player in round 2, something along those lines, and push that bonus pool tightly. I don't think they're going to go over the bonus pool, but they could certainly take a different approach to the draft this year. We usually don't see them go underslot in the first round, take a really highly prized prep player later, and they usually are playing things a little bit more safe, more chalk. This definitely has the potential to be a year that changes everything for Rockies draft philosophy.
Okay, so I know. Going back to the topic, if you go 100 to 105% of your budget will be 75% taxed. So you're like every dollar you're spending $1.75. Don't know where the taxes go. After that, if you go over, you lose a first and second round pick, and it's 100% tax. So it's double.
So basically, they've set that in place that nobody's ever going to do that.
It's probably not a worthwhile investment, even if you're like the Yankees.
Yeah, then you're paying an extra $1 million, $2 million, and you're losing out on huge draft capital,
which is losing you more money too.
Yeah, and in the end, less money to spend the next year on the draft, which is super important. So, yeah, the draft, it works in really funny ways. Like some people are probably listening to us right now, and there's so many of these things that are like sound nonsensical, like stupid. What are you talking about? It's a draft. Like there's so many weird financial implications that are at play, and it's not traditionally financial. It's not like teams actually trying to save money. You're guaranteed. It's like a trope. You're gonna see people talking about the Rockies saving money on draft night. I mean, sure, they end up not spending $100,000 usually of their bonus pool. I don't think that's by like design of we need to save $100,000. There is no cheapness in the draft. That doesn't exist. To an extent, I guess. I mean, the teams that push up 5% against their budget or over their budget like that, they're expending an extra $1 million. Like, sure, that shows that they are financially just going out there. But there's no cheapness on draft night. Any money that's quote unquote saved is not saved. It's just being used elsewhere. So, keep that in mind. That's, super important. This stuff is weird, complicated, but that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, I think it's because you got to think about it. If you offer 100% of your budget on the draft night or the week after, and then a high school shortstop comes back and says, "Hey, I got an offer from LSU. Give me an extra $100K." You already offered 100% of your budget. That $100K now is $175,000 an extra because of the tax. You don't want to be put in that situation. I'd much rather, as a GM, I think the Rockies would do this too. Let's save $200K, and if anything happens, we have a little budget to work with, like a little emergency fund for the draft.
Wait, it's much more like keeping that extra money around in case just your post-draft negotiations don't go to plan. Like those first guys that get drafted, almost always the agreement is already in place. But after that, it's very much like it's been discussed maybe, like, or at least sometimes it's just like they know, there's interest. As a player, a team's interested in you, but you haven't negotiated yet. So those later picks, it's where there can be a lot of unpredictable things going on, and having that flexibility, you don't want to bind yourself with certain picks and then, not have your financial flexibility to sign guys later on where there's some unpredictable factors. So it's not a bad thing to be like pressing, within the 100% instead of going over that.
Yeah, and you also have to spend 75% of your slot. Like you have to offer that. So there isn't like a guy, you can't just go out there and spend like $100,000 the whole draft and then save pocket $17 million at the end of it. So you can't be cheap. It's a really cheap way. We talk about teams like the Athletics, how people think of the Rockies might be like that. We're super cheap. We just spend money horrendously. It's not that we're cheap. But this draft is a super easy way to get like good depth, and just if you can hit on some mid to late round guys, that's super cheap quality players, and that can make a roster. I think we see with like the Yankees right now, where it's like relying on free agency is an awful thing because usually a player is either at their peak or past their peak whenever they hit that mark. And if you can hit on the draft, like that could be a game changer. Look at the Baltimore Orioles. You talked about Gunnar Henderson. There's a good chance they get 100 WAR between their first two picks with Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson in that draft.
Yeah,
don't think it can happen to the Rockies, but shit can change one draft.
It is. I mean, it's the most efficient way to add talent, like easily, and that's why they get made fun of the Rockies as being a draft and develop organization, and there's reasons for that. Obviously, they are not, leading the charge in draft and development, at least not historically. But it's a good mentality to have because we're not going to see that many free agency mega deals anymore. This is where you're going to get your players. And taking a sound approach to this, I mean, that's going to be the most important thing for building out your team. It's why, last pod we harped on positional value. Again, talking about the slots, like you really don't want to be making mistakes on draft night because, again, in this new era of baseball, this is how you build your team for the next 10 years. So there's a lot at stake. You have to really consider all the complex factors in every pick. Especially early on, you can't just mess around. So much at stake for the Rockies this year. I mean, it's super exciting. Can't be said enough.
Yeah, draft night's gonna be fun. I think I want to put it more into like a football perspective, the positional value. If you need a QB and you're looking at free agency, you're not gonna find one. Same thing with like a shortstop. If you do find one, like a Dansby Swanson, you're gonna have to pay for like 10 years, $30 million. Like it's gonna be a huge contract that you're probably gonna regret around year 7. If you need a running back that's like a corner outfield or like a third or second first baseman type, those are easy to find. Those are often put onto the market as a free agent. Like running backs, kind of like a meme in football, how easy it is to get production there. Not like 1-for-1 likeness there. Like corner outfield, it's still tough to find like a good corner outfielder. But compared to like center field, shortstop, if you can hit on those positions, you can save so much money. I know it doesn't look like it. I know like Moneyball, they have like the classic, where's this money going? But like over time, it will add up, especially 10 years from now. It's like, wow, thank God we got Slade Caldwell manning, center field right now. We don't have to go pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, think of Corbin Carroll. We could bring him up with Slade Caldwell again. That was a guy drafted in the middle of the first round, and he's had a rough sophomore season. But his rookie year was, that had it looking like one of the best picks that we've seen in a few years. So that's the model of the draft. You're looking to get. I mean, Corbin Carroll should probably play more center field. I think he plays a little bit, but it's the opportunity to get those guys up, well below the market value, and really change the fortune of your franchise. So if we haven't said enough that the draft is really important, We'll say it one more time. You got to hammer those important positions, but also just find franchise talent. Like sometimes running back to the NFL kind of idea. It's like, and this is a real question. Do you want to reach on a quarterback prospect that you're pretty indecisive on whether they're going to be a franchise player, or do you want to just take like a franchise defensive tackle, like someone you're like, if you knew for sure this guy's going to be a franchise D tackle, borderline Hall of Famer, versus a quarterback that could be Josh Allen, also could be, Paxton Lynch. Like, what are you getting? That's how you have to kind of think of this draft sometimes. That's Charlie Condon this year. I think he's that franchise D tackle, not the most flashy athleticism, positional value, but it's also not middle linebacker or running back that you're picking. That's a first baseman. So yeah, we're broken records at this point. There's just so much that's going on.
There's a meme on like NFL Twitter where it's like, especially during the draft time, where it's always like a quote where it's like, this team is one good draft away. And whenever anybody says that, it's like super funny because it applies for every single team. And same thing with baseball. The Orioles are like kind of like, I'm going to use that for the next decade, that example. Like, they drafted well, and now look at them. They're probably going to be good for the next decade. There you go. Like,
yeah. And I think it's a good segue into, we talked about it a little bit already. Day 2 and day 3 are hugely significant. And that's where you can have, this is the draft that makes, that pushes us over the edge. And, the first round and second round, of course, that's where it's easiest to make an impact. There's going to be the most impact, but day 3, you might find your, good bench players, potential starters, at any position. And the Rockies have done a good job there lately. So we're not going to talk about the 2024 draft right this moment. We're jumping back into 22 and 23. Some of these guys that the Rockies have picked up that look fantastic at this point. And in 2022, they've already got several top 30 prospects: Carson Palmquist, Ryan Ritter, Connor Stain, Mike Persecki, Zach Agnos. Those guys have all come from, day 2, day 3. Well, those guys were all day 2 picks. There's occasionally going to be a day 3 guy that really, really emerges. But day 2 is really where you're hammering out guys that could end up being the depth of your farm system. And now you look at Carson Palmquist and Ryan Ritter. Those guys are knocking on the doorstep of Major League Baseball. 2023, Jack Mahoney. We've talked about him at large lately. Just fantastic stuff. The rest of that day 2 class is really standing out at this point as well.
Yeah, I mean, the best hitter right now in the Rockies, Brendan Doyle, 4th-round pick out of Shepherd University. You can't beat that. Like, that's like, you asked me Brendan Doyle, I think that's our best player right now in the Rockies. And 4th-round pick, like, no one expected that, but we were able to draft and develop. I don't even know where Shepherd University is. I don't know what division it is. I don't think anybody knows. But there you go. We were able to find him 2nd round. Braden Ward, 16th round pick. That guy's like probably, I think, our best hitter, like, right now in terms of like just pure stat wise in the minor leagues. Like, Jared Candy was a late round pick. So many good players in the system didn't come from like top 5 picks.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where you have the chance to, the Rockies haven't made a lot of trades lately, but if you end up making a trade where, boom, this 14th round pick we made has turned into a really legit prospect. And now you're flipping him at the deadline for a rental. Like, you turned a 14th round pick into a player that might really change the fortune of, especially of a playoff run. So these are picks that really do make a huge impact, and they're not going to get the same draft coverage. Like, draft coverage drops off after that first night. That first night it goes like 70 picks or something like that. It goes through the second round, 74 picks. This year is going to be the first night. After that, unless you follow the team really closely, you're not going to hear about those guys much, if at all. We're, of course, we do things a little bit differently here. We're going to give you that coverage. But, just for without us even providing the coverage, like, those are guys you should, give some attention to, look a little bit deeper under the surface, because, otherwise those guys are eventually going to be Brenton Doyle, and you're sort of like, where did he come from? Because I don't think people knew about Brenton Doyle much until he was debuting for the Rockies. Like, at some point he was a top 10 prospect in the system, but not the most exciting one. Like, his minor league numbers weren't great. So a lot can happen in this world. And again, super fun. I wrote an article like months ago that this was the most important draft in Rockies history. And, I truly do believe that. We talked about the money. There is a chance for huge impact and fortune changing kind of stuff to go on.
I'm looking at so like I mean even like back when the draft was like 40 rounds, we still had some like elite picks, like even like high schoolers. I'm looking at like we had some picks back in like 2019 that like looking back were like pretty good scouting like looks. Like of course we have like Brady Hill, Darius Perry, which like we ended up redrafting those guys, but like Silas Ardoin's like a pretty good catcher for the Orioles minor league system. We kind of just see those all around. So even I know we're not 40 rounds anymore, but it is kind of funny to see like the progression through the draft and how even like these late round, like Winston Bernard was like a 30-something round pick. Even though like these guys are later round picks, if you get enough like darts thrown at the board, you're gonna land one.
Yeah, and usually you always, if you circle back on a lot of those days, well, at least the 40 round era was so fun because you would see that you could circle back on a lot of those guys, and it's like all of a sudden they are really good players now. So that again, yeah, it's a good indication that even then those were the high school guys that weren't signing, but there still can be talent on day 3. And I'm flipping back to this was 2016. The Rockies drafted Rico Garcia in round 30, who obviously his tenure was short with the Rockies. He was in the big leagues in like 2 years and like looked solid. He's caught on with some other teams, in the past. So you just never know what stories you're going to find there. I mean, obviously that's a huge thing for BSB is sharing those under the radar stories. So it's definitely going to come from this year in those later rounds. And the Rockies, I think something that needs to be talked about is that their scouting as a whole has improved greatly in the new front office era. I think some of it has to do with there being more data available and actually being used. And then combining that with, hopefully some good scouting looks that are being had. So I think the Rockies are going to continue to hit on some of these day 2, day 3 picks and turn into actual middle of the system guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing that with like, I feel like back in the day, it was really easy when we signed someone to be like, hey, this was a good signing, this was a bad signing. Now it was like Cal Control looks good. Ignore yesterday. He looks great. Jacob Stallings, we were clowning this pickup. Like, why are we not giving someone in the minor leagues a chance? And he looks great. Like, it looks like they really have something going, especially for like cores, where it's like my frame of mind. Like, I was wrong because I don't have the data. I'm not as well versed in that stuff as they are, and that's good. They're getting paid for that, so that hopefully that's the case. But so I think the development's been great, and we look at that in the minor league system. It looks pretty good. Even like back in the day though, like we're still nailing like middle round picks. In 2016, I think it was like Toko Montes in like the 15th round, which Nippon baseball future legend. Put some respect on his name. Like to find a good player that like a good. I know we hate the quad A like name. Everybody kind of despises that. To find that in like the 15th round is like an elite. I keep saying like elite. That's an elite pick because you need that type of guy.
Yeah, and I mean, just to circle back on the kind of final point on these day 2, day 3 picks, Brenton Doyle is a good example out of the 4th round. Not many guys are coming out of the 4th round and being good big leaguers. So when you do actually hit on something like that is special. But again, look at these last 2 Rockies drafts. Like the guys they have drafted in those middle rounds on day 2, all of them look pretty legitimate. Like there is a chance for multiple big leaguers to come from day 2 of these last few Rockies drafts. It's just such a key part that you have to hit on as a team. And I think just to close this pod out, and you can drop your thoughts on this a little bit too. I mean, the Rockies as an organization are no longer that joke. Like I'm not saying they're forward thinking, they're at the forefront of stuff. They are right there with a lot of other teams when it comes to their draft process and how everything is going. Like have faith in what's going to happen on draft night. Historically has always been a really solid area for the Rockies. They have hit on a lot of good players. They also have kind of wasted some picks and not turned in enough depth, but things are really, really starting to change. So just the Rockies have an ability to do this. So if you're one of those people who's like the Rockies are bad at everything, this is, it's not true. This is one of those things they have gotten quite good at doing.
Yeah, when I was editing the banner, I saw you had the like analytics and laundry shirt, and I was like, "That's a funny joke." And then it's like a real thing, and it's like a legit. Like, they were having the analytics people do laundry, so I think we've come such a long way from that.
Yeah, I think that story, it was that Nick Groke story that broke. I think that really changed the fortune of this team. And that's be a good topic to talk about on like a regular Blake Street Banner pod. Just things have come a long way in a short amount of time. And, I want to tell listeners, whoever is listening, as someone in me who follows the draft from like the grand overall perspective, looking at other teams' processes, following these prospects all throughout the minors, looking into the college data and all that, like truly the Rockies are doing a pretty good job on that front. So don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because truly they are coming along. It's going to be how this team does rebuild itself. Like whenever that happens, it's going to be courtesy of the draft most likely. So anything else that good at the cause? I mean, after this, yeah, we're going live on Sunday.
I was gonna say I think we have like draft day, and then I think the next time there's like something that is as big for our future. I want to say it's December something for the draft lottery. That's like the next big thing for us. So this is like it's like draft lottery, international signing day, trade deadline. I guess. Well, I'll put that there, and draft lottery is huge now. 7. It's like we're not getting Ethan Holiday, but there you go. So there you go. This is probably, like you said, one of the more influential days will be Sunday for the whole future of the Rockies. For Bill Schmidt's career, this is a big draft for Bill Schmidt's like regime. Like, not many times do you pick with this much money in the draft.
And actually, the class that has so many good. There's no unanimous number one player in this draft class, and that plays to the benefit of the Rockies at 3. Whoever they take there. If it's Charlie Condon, Chase Burns, those are the 2 most likely guys. They're probably going to be in purple in 10 years. Like that would be kind of the end of their rookie contracts, or like not rookie, the end of their team control arbitration eligibility. That's 10 years from now. Like we're talking 10 years. Whoever this player is, that's like going to be the end of arbitration for them. Hopefully they're here longer than that even. That means that they've done a fantastic job in the system. So we are looking to draft the franchise player at pick number 3. That pick 38, pick 42, really good chance to get a starting caliber player for this team as well. So we're going to have that all covered for you guys Sunday. So yeah, super influential day. This is the most important day of the year for the Rockies and their future. So
we have crazy content coming. I have like 7 graphics saved for this week. I don't know if you've seen the Blake Street Banner messages, but I keep sending them because. Anyways, we have crazy content. Like we're gonna be, it's insane. What we got going for draft night. It's gonna be fun. Second day we'll be live. Third day we'll be live tweeting, putting out articles. I know we've kind of beat that to death. This idea that we're gonna have the best content. Like if you're a Rockies fan and you want to know about the draft, we're the only place for you. No other place is gonna cover it like us.
Yeah. So again, if you're listening and hearing that this is the most important day of the year or days of the year for the Rockies, we're doing it better than anybody.
Like not only are we doing it better, we're doing it like substantially better. Like we're doing it
well by any standard. So
we're like a first round pick. No other Rockies media comes within a top 10 round pick. So there you go.
So comes
draft metaphor.
Yeah, come back for all the content, and most importantly, tune in Sunday. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that did not listen to this that come Sunday, but if you did listen to this podcast, if you have this message right now us and you're there on Sunday, type in Slade Caldwell in the chat. Just Slade Caldwell. Let's manifest him to be picked by the Rockies. I guess if you want to, you might not. But either way, just type Slade Caldwell in the chat. I'm kind of curious to see how many people get this far and come and listen. But it's going to be super fun Sunday. Otherwise, just go Rocks draft picks. New variant.
Thank you for watching and listening. Please check out our link tree for more content.